Good morning, everybody. The committee meets today to consider the nomination of General Joseph Dunford to be the 36th Commandant of the Marine Corps. General Dunford, welcome to the Senate Armed Services Committee. Thank you for the many years of extraordinary service that you've provided to our nation. Also for your willingness to continue to serve. And please also extend our thanks to your family, part of whom is here today, for their dedication and support, which is so critical, as we all know, to your success and the success of all those who serve in important positions and pressured positions for our nation. And please feel free to introduce any family members or other people who are with you here today. General Dunford has an exemplary record of service, is highly qualified for the position to which he has been nominated. He has commanded Marines from the platoon level to the Marine Expeditionary Force. He has served as the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps. He is currently the Commander, International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, and Commander, United States Forces, Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, General Dunford has commanded U.S. and coalition forces with great distinction. He's the latest in a line of distinguished commanders in that position. He has overseen the critical transition from U.S. and coalition-led combat operations to Afghan-led operations throughout Afghanistan. Under General Dunford's leadership, the drawdown of U.S. forces and the shift to a train, advise, and assist mission is being carried out with considerable effectiveness. General Dunford has demonstrated remarkable skills as both a military leader and a diplomat in his interactions with the Afghan leadership, which have been essential to keeping the transition in Afghanistan on track. General Dunford, as Commandant of the Marine Corps, you're going to be tasked with recruiting and retaining a quality force and ensuring that force contains the necessary structure and readiness levels to meet our nation's current challenges and the posture to respond to tomorrow's crises and contingencies. These responsibilities are demanding enough on their own. However, you're also going to be asked to assume control at a time of immense fiscal challenge, particularly because of sequestration. Thank you and your family again for your service to our nation. We look forward to your testimony and your swift confirmation. And I now recognize Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General Dunford, the great job that you've had during arguably the most consequential periods of the war. With our Afghan partners, we're making important gains against the Taliban and are solidifying our progress in building the capacity of the Afghan security forces to defend their country. Despite this progress, I'm still concerned about the future of Afghanistan. The recent agreement to perform a complete audit of the presidential runoff is encouraging. And I hope that works out. I think you and I talked about this before. That's just really critical. The Afghan people are going to have to believe the results of this thing, and so hopefully we can make that happen. I remain very troubled by the President's plan to draw down our forces based on arbitrary timelines instead of the advice of our commanders and the facts on the ground. The President tried the same policy in Iraq in 2011. We can't afford to repeat that same mistake in Afghanistan. As Commandant, you take command of the Marine Corps. Marine Corps, as it's being challenged by rising global threats and budgetary crises at home. Budget cuts are degrading readiness and forcing a dangerous drop in end strength. General Amos has said that these budget cuts mean that, and this is a quote, we will have fewer forces arriving less trained, arriving later to the fight. This is a formula for more American casualties. I think he's probably right, and we'll ask you some questions on your agreement on that. So I'm glad you're the man at the helm. I appreciate very much your being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. General?
Chairman Levin, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm truly honored to be nominated as the 36th Commandant of the United States Marine Corps. Joining me today is my wife, Ellen. I'm fortunate to have her love and support. She's been a great mother to our 3 children who are now young adults, and she's also served as a tireless advocate for military families. I always refer to her as the most valuable player of the Dunford family, and she certainly earned that title during the last 18 months of my deployment to Afghanistan. I'm also joined by my niece, Cara, our sons, Joseph, Patrick, and Kathleen. They're unable to be with us today, but Ellen and I are proud of all of them. I'd like to begin by thanking the committee for your support of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines now serving in Afghanistan. Due to your leadership, I have no doubt they are the best trained and equipped force our nation has ever sent to war. Their performance and the strength of our military families bear testimony to that support. I'd also like to recognize the 1,817 Americans who have made the ultimate sacrifice in Afghanistan and the nearly 20,000 who have been wounded. Each day, the men and women of the United States forces in Afghanistan work to bring meaning to their sacrifice. I know this committee and the American people have high expectations for the United States Marine Corps. You expect your Marine Corps to serve as a naval expeditionary force in readiness, a force that is most ready when the nation is least ready. You expect your Marine Corps to be forward deployed and forward engaged, responding to crises and enabling our nation to respond to contingencies. You expect your Marine Corps to fight and win in any climate and place and under any conditions. And you expect your Marines to be physically and mentally tough. You expect your Marines to demonstrate courage, honor, and commitment. You expect a lot of your Marines, and you should. If confirmed as the Commandant of the United States Marine Corps, I will ensure that Marines continue to meet your expectations and the expectations of the American people. I'll also ensure the well-being of our Marines, sailors, wounded warriors, and their families. Over the past decade plus of war, they've done all we have asked of them and more. It would be a tremendous honor to lead them. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you this morning. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, General. We start with a set of standard questions which we ask of all of our nominees. And these questions are asked so that this committee can exercise our legislative and our oversight responsibilities. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
I have, Chairman.
Do you agree when asked to give your personal views, even if those views differ from the administration in power?
I do, Chairman.
Have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
I have not, Chairman.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record at hearings?
I will, Chairman.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
I will, Chairman.
Will these witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
They will.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
I do, Chairman.
And finally, do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electronic forms of communication, in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
I do, Chairman.
Thank you.
7 minutes. Sounds good.
Okay. We'll have a 7-minute first round. General, in my view, Afghanistan has made remarkable progress over the past decade. It has improved the lives of the Afghan people. This includes increases many times over in the number of schools, the number of students and teachers, including female students and teachers, greater access to health facilities, and a leap in Afghan life expectancy, expanded connections to electricity, water, and cell phones, and growing income. Can you briefly address the extent of the changes in Afghanistan over the past decade that the United States has been involved there, and give us a sense of the significance of those changes to the Afghan people for the future of the country?
Chairman, thank you for that question. And probably the first thing I would say is that I think one of the most significant outcomes of our time in Afghanistan has been that we put pressure on the terrorist networks and al-Qaeda and prevented another 9/11. We've also developed capable and credible Afghan forces. In 2002, there were no effective Afghan security forces. There's today an Army and a police force of over 352,000, as well as another 30,000 Afghan local police that are capable of providing security to the Afghan people. We also have enabled, through those Afghan forces, the Afghan people the opportunity to determine their own future with the successful elections of the 5th of April and the 14th of June from a security perspective. And while we still have some political issues to work through for those elections, there's no question that the Afghan security forces afforded the Afghan people the opportunity to vote. We have today over 8 million children in school, 2 million of those young girls. In 2001, there were less than 1 million people in school. And Chairman, you mentioned some of the other advances in healthcare, communications, road networks, and so forth that will set the conditions for a secure, stable Afghanistan in the future. But I would say that the most profound thing that exists in Afghanistan today that didn't exist in 2001 is hope. The Afghan people actually have hope and confidence in a future that didn't exist under the oppression and the tyranny of the Taliban in 2001.
Thank you, General. Is the Afghan Army performing well, in your judgment?
Chairman, they are performing well, and since what we described as milestone 2013, last June, when they assumed responsibility across the country, the only unilateral operations that the coalition forces have conducted are for our own security and retrograde and redeployment operations. But I would probably just highlight one statistic that is indicative of the Afghans' performance. In 2012, we had over 140,000 coalition forces on the ground. That included 100,000 Americans. Today, there are 40,000 coalition forces, of which 30,000 are Americans. And in those 2 years, the security environment has actually slightly improved since 2012. And the big difference, of course, is that the Afghan security forces now are responsible for security. So I feel very confident about the trajectory that Afghan security forces are on at this time.
Thank you. General, the President has called for drawing down U.S. forces to 9,800 by the end of this year, reducing that force by approximately half by the end of 2015, and transitioning to an embassy-based military presence by the end of 2016. In your answers to pre-hearing questions, you said that you support the President's decision on the size of the U.S. troop presence in Afghanistan post-2014. Is that correct?
Chairman, I do support the numbers of forces that will be on the ground in 2015 to both conduct counterterrorism operations and train, advise, and assist.
Now, also in your answers to pre-hearing questions, you said that you support the pace of reductions outlined by the President, quote, with an understanding that we should continue to validate the assumptions and assess the conditions on the ground as the drawdown takes place, close quote. Now, is one of your assumptions that the full 9,800 personnel force will be available through the entire 15 fighting season?
It is one of the assumptions I made, yes, Chairman.
And then the reductions under that assumption would occur only at the end of next year?
That's correct, Chairman.
All right. Can you share with us any other major assumptions which you made?
I can, Chairman. I think the critical assumptions that have to continue to be validated as we move forward are, first and foremost, the counterterrorism capability and the will of Afghanistan, the nature of the threat, the counterterrorism capacity and the will of Pakistan also needs to be considered. The quality of political transition that we're in the midst of has to be considered, and also the international community's support, both fiscally as well as troops in support of the NATO mission. I think all of those are variables that would have to be considered when determining the adequacy of our force levels in the future.
And there's also an assumption in your answers and in your statements that a bilateral security agreement will be signed in a timely manner. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairman.
The relative to the size of the U.S. counterterrorism mission in Afghanistan after 2014, what is your recommendation about the size of that mission, the counterterrorism mission?
Chairman, of the 9,800 U.S. forces, and it's probably important to highlight that the expectation is that there'd be approximately 4,000 NATO forces in addition to those 9,800. But of the 9,800 U.S. forces, approximately 1,000 would be dedicated solely to the counterterrorism mission, but there would be a total of 2,000 special operations forces that are there, some of those working with the Afghan special operations forces who would also be participating in counterterrorism operations.
I want to change the subject slightly to the question of the Russian M-17 military transport helicopters. You recently wrote me, General, regarding a provision in the Defense Authorization Bill, which this committee marked up, that would prohibit any contracts with the Russian corporation that exports the M117 military helicopter. And you indicated that this prohibition could be catastrophic. Can you explain why?
I can, Chairman. Thank you for that question. The Afghan Air Force will consist of over 80 Mi-17s. All those aircraft have been purchased. The final delivery will be in September, October of this year. Those aircraft provide the Afghan forces with the operational reach to provide security and stability to the Afghan people, as well as to conduct effective counterterrorism operations. 30 of those 80 Mi-17s are for what we call a special mission wing, which is the Afghan Special Operations Forces capability to both conduct counterterrorism and counter-narcotics operations. Without the operational reach of the Mi-17, the Afghan forces will not be successful in providing security and stability in Afghanistan and will not be an effective counterterrorism partner. And then one of the second-order effects of that, Chairman, which is why I use the word catastrophic, is that we'll also have an adverse impact on our force protection in 2015. Among the assumptions that I make in 2015 is the Afghan security forces will contribute to the force protection of coalition forces in 2015, and that their ability to do that would be significantly degraded without the Mi-17.
And it's the spare parts, as I understand it, the sustainment that is prohibited by that same language, which is so important.
There's two issues, Chairman. One of them is the ability to have spare parts and to sustain the Mi-17 fleet. The other is that Rosenboro, the Russian company, owns the plans and the blueprints, if you will, of the Mi-17. So there's also safety of flight issues with subsequent modifications and refurbishment of aircraft that would require our dealing either directly with the contractor or the subcontractor, Rosenboro.
Thank you. Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to bring that up. That probably is the most contentious issue on this up here. I agree with the chairman on this, and it's I've seen some of the pretty extreme and courageous statements made. Whether or not some members up here agree with them is a different matter. But the Special Inspector General for the Afghan Reconstruction, SIGAR, on June of 13, reported a thing that it was entitled "The Afghan Special Mission Wing, DoD Moving Forward with a $771 million purchase." That the aircraft and that the Afghans cannot operate and cannot maintain. Is there any way that this could be changed and moderated a little bit so that you could still use the spare parts of existing vehicles that are there, that are paid for, that are in existence, and still start toward something, another purchase? Have you thought about any kind of a combination that might work out where we could not lose the value of those that are the 88, as I understand, that are there, they're trained fighters to fly them, just as far as spare parts are concerned? Have you thought about that?
Senator, we have looked very hard. In fact, we've done a global search to see if it would be possible to sustain the Mi-17 fleet without directly dealing with Rosenboro or one of its subcontractors. And my assessment is that that would not be possible.
Yeah. All right. There is recently let me see if I can get this on a BlackBerry. I'm quoting now from, was this yesterday? Tuesday, the speech that was made before the Brookings Institute, when General Amos said, quote, "It breaks our hearts," referring to the fall of the Anbar province in Iraq, which Marines won in 2010. He noted that 852 Marines were killed and another 8,500 injured in Iraq. I believe that they had made the difference. I know that you are, all the work you did in Afghanistan, and I'm sure you're observant as to what happened in Iraq. I mentioned to you when you were in my office that I have a young man named Brian Hackler who works for me now, but he actually had 2 deployments they were in Fallujah. And by coincidence, I didn't know who he was at that time, but I was there, as were many of these guys there, when they had the fingerprints and all of that. And I think, looking at it, that probably arguably could be considered to be the most violent door-to-door World War II type of activity. And when I called up Brian Hackler and told him that we had lost that after they had gained it, I mean, he talked about the blood, sweat, and tears. He's been called by a lot of people since then. I just look at that taking place. My concern, obviously, for bringing this up is that we don't want the same thing to happen in Afghanistan. And I know, since you're the Marine and you saw the mission that took place there, you agree with me. What all has been done, in your opinion, to make sure that we don't have a repeat of that tragedy that took place in Iraq?
Thanks, Senator. And I was one of the thousands of Marines that did serve in the Anbar province and feel the same way that Brian Hackworth does. Senator, I think the biggest difference is we have an opportunity to do a transition in Afghanistan, a proper transition that will allow us to achieve our end state. In Iraq, we withdrew with the associated consequences, and to me, that's the most significant change. We knew when we left Iraq that there was work remaining to be done to develop sustainable Iraqi security forces, as well as to ensure that political stability existed in Iraq such that security and stability would continue. In Afghanistan, we have a chance to get that right, and my argument, in fact, is for us to do a responsible transition from Afghanistan as opposed to a withdrawal.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good, and I appreciate that. I just think we need to get on record, because a lot of people, it's awful hard to explain to people how that happened, including the Brian Hacklers around who were a part of it. There's been a lot of discussion on the 38 amphibious ships and dropping that number down to 33. And I have a letter, Mr. Chairman, I want to make a part of the record right now at this point in the record.
Made part of the record.
That there are, and it's one that you have read and that each member up here has read, from the 20 generals signing on saying that they think it's absolutely necessary not to deal with that reduction of 33. Any comments you want to make on that?
Well, Senator, what I do know is that on a day-to-day basis, the combatant commanders' requirements for amphibious ships greatly exceed the inventory. In fact, I'm a bit dated, but not too much, and I think there were close to 50 was the requirement on a day-to-day basis. The Chief of Naval Operations, the Secretary of Navy, and the Commandant a few years ago concluded that 38 was the requirement, and we're now at the point where we have 33 in a fiscally constrained environment, but actually 31 in the inventory. So I would support anything that would allow us to maintain an effective amphibious ship inventory.
Yeah, and a lot of good points were brought out in that letter. Do you agree with the letter?
Senator, I have not seen the letter.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fine. Lastly, on the elections, and a lot of us, I think, are partly responsible for the fact that there is going to be an audit. There's going to be a real effort there to make sure that not just the justice is done and the right turnout is resulted, but also that the people of Afghanistan will accept this as a fair and honest election. Do you have any thoughts on I know you're going into a different job now, but on what needs to be done to make sure that can happen?
I do, Senator, and I expect to still be there throughout the process.
Sure.
We did begin yesterday. I'm glad to report that we began yesterday to gather the ballots in accordance with the agreement that was made over the weekend. 100% of the ballots will be brought back to Kabul and audited. There's significant international community oversight as well as candidate oversight in the process of counting those ballots. I think that will give both the candidates and the Afghan people high confidence that all that can be done is being done to eliminate the fraudulent ballots and determine a good outcome. I think the most encouraging thing, and I know some of the members recently spoke to both candidates, the most encouraging thing is both candidates are very responsible. They know the consequences of the political transition process, and they have agreed to accept the outcome of the ballot with certain parameters, and those parameters are now in place. And so I'm optimistic that at the end of this process, some weeks from now, there'll be a winner and a loser, and the loser will accept the results of the election, as will the Afghan people.
Well, I appreciate that very much. We all know the significance of that election. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Reed.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to join my colleagues, General, in commending you for your extraordinary service to the Marine Corps and to the nation, and to thank your family for serving with you. And knowing you a little bit, I think you would first point to the soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, and airwomen who served as the real source of our success, and your predecessors, but your role has been absolutely critical. A year ago, I don't think anyone would have sort of said we'd have two relatively peaceful elections in that country, monitored principally by the Afghan National Security Forces, not by international personnel. And again, that's one significant aspect and contribution of your individual and personal command. So thank you, sir, for what you've done. Can you talk, as we go forward, about the decision points and the flexibility we have to make adjustments with respect to our presence in Afghanistan, assuming, of course, that the Status of Forces Agreement will be signed and the Strategic Partnership will be signed?
Again, Senator, as we've discussed earlier, there'll be 9,800 U.S. forces in Afghanistan. The plan that we have right now would not begin to draw those forces down until the end of the fighting season in 2015. And so the first opportunity to change, make adjustments, as you described them, would be in the fall of 2015, where you can affect change in the projected numbers in 2016. And then whatever number you have in 2016, a similar construct would probably be in place for 2016, where the numbers that you would want to have in 2017 could be determined in the summer of 2016 to affect change in the plans for 2017. But it typically will run in a post-fighting season pattern over the next couple of years in terms of affecting change, which is not to say you couldn't add forces, but this is to make adjustments to forces on the ground.
Well, not only forces on the ground, but facilities that may be occupied because of conditions in the country?
Senator, that's absolutely one of the drivers, and what we've tried to do is make sure that the infrastructure doesn't drive our ability to provide train, advise, assist in 2015. So we've done some things to maintain a flexible posture in 2015, but at the end of the day, infrastructure is absolutely one of the drivers to the timeline.
And there's two principal missions. One is to train, equip, and advise of the Afghan National Security Forces, and the other is the counterterrorism operations. And those will be, you'll view the force structure in terms of both those missions. That's correct?
Absolutely, Senator, and from my perspective, they're inextricably linked.
And you're comfortable with this going forward because of the built-in flexibility, and you see no arbitrary constraints going forward. I mean, the review that will be done at the end of next year will be based upon the conditions on the ground, the two missions that we outlined, and the facts as the commander, presumably General Campbell, sees at that time.
Senator, I'm confident that the specific assumptions, the conditions, and the tasks that have to be accomplished that drove our recommendation for 2015, all that's available to my successor, and he'll have the opportunity to go back in 2015 and to revalidate those assumptions and to assess the conditions, one of the important conditions, of course, being the nature of the threat to our nation after 2015.
And again, invariably, the parallels are drawn between the situation in Iraq and Afghanistan. But in Iraq in 2008, President Bush signed a formal agreement with the government of Iraq to withdraw all forces at a fixed date at the end of 2011. That is not going to be the policy in Afghanistan, as you understand it. In fact, we would have the flexibility for our own interest to change the mix and change the disposition of forces going forward, and that is, I would assume, a key difference.
Senator, it is a key difference. One of the key differences is that, one, the Afghan people want us to be in Afghanistan in overwhelming numbers, and I've recently spoken to both presidential candidates, and I can assure you that both presidential candidates also support a U.S. presence after 2014.
One of the key factors, which is you've already acknowledged, is the role of Pakistan. And one of the interesting developments, which I think you appreciate very keenly, and I wonder how much our colleagues in Pakistan do, is as we draw down our forces and depend less and less on the lines of communication to Pakistan, our relative leverage goes up. Is that a fair estimate in terms of getting their cooperation and getting their help?
Senator, it does. I think our footprint in Afghanistan has made us reliant on the ground lines of communication. And I think after 2014, we have an opportunity to reframe our relationship with Pakistan.
And right now, they're conducting operations much more aggressively, but probably not as effectively as they would even want. Is that a fair judgment?
Senator, they are conducting operations in North Waziristan, and we've certainly wanted them to do that for some years. They've had some success against the Pakistani Taliban and the IMU in North Waziristan, from the best that we can tell, but certainly have not had the effect against the Haqqani network and others that we would want to have seen, although it certainly has had a disruptive effect on the Haqqani network in the sense that they have all been forced to move out of their sanctuary in the Miram Shah area.
Let me just change quickly, because your new job as the Commandant of the Marine Corps touches upon sort of issues of budget, the potential sequestration effects. I'm sure you've sort of thought about them, but not in, I presume, in detail. But going forward, can you just give us your sort of sense of the readiness challenges that you'll face and other challenges that the Corps faces today?
Senator, thank you. I think as I look at the future of the Marine Corps, our leadership, the biggest challenge we're going to have is to balance readiness, the crisis response capability that you expect from the United States Marine Corps, with the ability to modernize the Marine Corps for tomorrow's fights, to sustain infrastructure, to maintain proper levels of training and so forth for those units at home stations. So balancing all those in a fiscally constrained environment is going to be very difficult. I know that General Amos has prioritized readiness. I also know that he's been forced to make some decisions that create challenges in the future for modernization, and I think balancing those things over the next couple of years are going to be difficult.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Reed. With thanks to Senators Chambliss and Wicker, Senator McCain.
Thanks to Senator Chambliss and Wicker. It shows we live long enough. That, thank you, General Dunford. And
This is an in-joke. I had to explain all this. But,
it's the only appropriate mark of respect that I have ever gotten from my two colleagues. I thank you. I thank you, General Dunford, for your outstanding service. We've had the opportunity of encountering many times over the past 12, 13, 14 years, and I appreciate your service. And I really am reluctant to get back into this, but the people keep trying to say that, in 2008 we said we'd have everybody out, that we really wanted to stay in Iraq. And the fact is that the President of the United States, there was never any public statement the President made, the United States made, that said he wanted to stay, have a residual force in Iraq. And the fact is, and Senator Graham and I were there and know full well that if we had really wanted to, we could have kept a residual force there, and we're paying a very heavy price for not doing so. And we were on the ground there when Maliki and Barzani and Alawi agreed. And in the words of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we cascaded down to 3,500 troops that they wanted to leave behind, which was absolutely ridiculous. So, we'll be fighting this for years to come, but facts are stubborn things, and we could have left a residual force if we had wanted to do so. In fact, today your predecessor said, quote, in the Brookings Institute's General Amos said, I have a hard time believing that had we been there and worked with the government and worked with the Parliament and worked with the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Interior, I don't think we'd be in the same shape we're in today. Now, those are just facts. Now, General Dunford, did you or any other senior military leader personally recommend the policy of everybody out by 2017, no matter what?
No, Senator.
No ranking military officer that you know recommended a hard date for everybody out of Afghanistan. Is that right?
None that I know of, Senator. And I think we still plan to have, as you know, some presence after 2017, but no one recommended zero.
Did anybody recommend that we have a conditions-based decision about what kind of residual force we should leave behind?
Senator, I think you appreciate that every military leader would want to have the conditions on the ground and the assumptions be revalidated as a transition takes place.
Isn't it true that right now, the way that the counterterrorism capability of the Afghans are today, that we cannot abandon that? If you had to make the decision today, with the lack of counterterrorism capability the Afghans have, we would have to leave that kind of force behind, at least for the counterterrorism mission.
Senator, there's no doubt that the Afghan forces today would not be capable of conducting the kind of operations we're conducting to put pressure on the network.
Nor right now do you envision them having that capability by 2017.
No, not if you project the threat that exists today.
Including recent rocket attacks on the airport in Kabul show that the Taliban is still pretty resilient. And isn't it a fact that as long as the Taliban have basically a sanctuary in Pakistan, that this situation will remain extremely complex and dangerous?
Senator, absolutely. The resiliency of the Taliban movement is driven by their sanctuary in Pakistan.
Is there any doubt in your mind that the announcement of a complete withdrawal by 2017 has had effect on the morale of the Afghan army?
Senator, I think all of us in uniform, to include the Afghans, would have preferred that be a bit more ambiguous.
In fact, we were told recently in Kabul by Afghan military officers, they said, quote, "You are abandoning us." That's what they told me and Senator Graham. And I don't think they would have any reason to tell us otherwise. Very quickly, so the fact is that we need a conditions-based decision because we right now are not confident that the Afghans can take up the complete burden of their own security. Very quickly, sequestration. Right now, as I understand it, Marine captains and Army captains who are in the field fighting right now as we speak are receiving notices that they're going to be involuntarily separated from the United States Army and Marine Corps. Is that true?
Senator, my understanding is that is what the Army has been forced to do as a result of the drawdown. The Marine Corps is not doing that at this time with captains that are forward deployed.
And obviously, that has to have an effect on morale of our officer corps.
It does, Senator.
And a serious blow, I would think.
Absolutely, and probably more importantly, Senator, than just the officer corps is the message it sends to the young soldiers whose company commander is forced to redeploy as a result of being reduced in force, a reduction in force.
And isn't it true from your time in the military and remembering worse times that it takes a long time to restore the morale of the military when you take out some of the best and the brightest that we have had? Haven't we seen that movie before in your early part of your career?
I have, Senator. In the late 1970s, it took us some years, probably into 1983 or 1984, before we recovered from the effects of the post-Vietnam drawdown.
Well, would you agree that perhaps one of the greatest responsibilities that Congress and the military has today is to review this sequestration and its effects that it is having long-term on our ability to defend this nation?
I would agree with that, Senator.
So I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and both sides of this podium, that making that one of our highest priorities. And otherwise, I think that it is the unanimous opinion of every military leader that I've met that continued sequestration on the path we're on could have devastating effects on our ability to defend this nation. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, Senator.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator McCain. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General, the chairman covered the MI-17 issue, but I just think it's really important to have your unequivocal view that I think the word you used was catastrophic if we cut off spare parts, and that would in effect ground the Afghan Air Force. Is that true?
Senator, it is, and the reason I use the word catastrophic, which I don't think is hyperbole, is because the inability for the Afghans to have the operational reach represented by the Mi-17 will seriously deteriorate their ability to take the fight to the enemy. But the more important reason I use the word catastrophic is that their inability to take the fight to the enemy actually will put young Americans in harm's way in 2015 and beyond.
Thank you, General. You've discussed this. Looking now at the lessons of Iraq, what do we learn from that can avoid that future in Afghanistan? As you know, there are those who aren't as optimistic as the military about Afghanistan's future after our withdrawal. What do we learn from Iraq to avoid that fate?
I think the key thing that we have in Afghanistan, we're in the process of right now, is an effective political transition, but also the opportunity to continue to develop the sustainability of Afghan security forces. I'm very confident about the Afghan forces' ability to provide security on a day-to-day basis. I'm not confident that if we were to leave at the end of 2014, that those forces would be sustainable. There are some significant capability gaps that have to be addressed in order for the Afghans to be able to do things that we have heretofore been doing for them. There's still a degree of what I describe as capability substitution. Many of those areas are planning, programming, budgeting, execution, things we take for granted, delivery of spare parts, delivery of fuel, pay systems, and those kinds of things that the Army would need. And so I think the key lesson is that after all of the sacrifice and all the accomplishments over the past 13 years, what we need to do is ensure that the transition results in the Afghan forces being sustainable without our presence at some point in the future.
What's the ethnic makeup of the Afghan army? One of the problems in Iraq appears to be the unequal distribution ethnically or sectarianly, I suppose, if that's a word, in Iraq. Is the ethnic tribal makeup of the Afghanistan security forces representative of the country so that the security forces will have a broad support within the country?
Senator, thanks for that question. It is an important question. The officer corps in the Afghan Army is about 40% Tajik, 40% Pashtun. The NCO corps is about the same. The forces are about the same. That's a slight overrepresentation of Tajiks in the sense that the Pashtun population represents some 40-plus percentage of the population, and about 27% of the population is Tajik. And I would caveat those statistics by telling you that there hasn't been a census in Afghanistan for a long period of time. So those statistics are the best that we have available to us. But in general terms, we have the foundation of a national army in Afghanistan that is in fact representative not only of the various ethnic groups, but representative geographically.
And is this representation integrated throughout the force? In other words, are individual battalions or units balanced ethnically?
Senator, they are. They are balanced. There is a slight overrepresentation of forces from the northern part of the country and the eastern part of the country, slightly less from the southern part of the country, but the demographics in each of the units represents the nation as a whole, as opposed to specific units being Tajik or Pashtun and so forth. So the assignment of people inside the Afghan Army is not based on their geographical area. In fact, most all serve away from home.
We tend to focus around here on problems. That's what we talk about. That's our job. But my sense is that Secretary Kerry and what happened last weekend was a big deal, and the avoidance of what could have been a disastrous situation. Could you share some thoughts about the importance of the uniform recount, and B, the power? I understand there's a kind of power sharing agreement or a coalition government agreement of whatever the outcome. This could have been a disaster for us if it had gone the wrong way this past week.
Senator, thanks. Last week, there was a lot of discussion in Afghanistan about one of the candidates establishing a parallel government with the potential for civil war. And I would assess that risk as having been significant. I don't think either one of the candidates wanted to do that, but there was certainly a strong sentiment by large numbers of people that were so outraged at the fraud that took place in the election that they were willing to take extreme measures. I think what happened this weekend was very encouraging in that both candidates have agreed to a framework for an audit process that will deliver the cleanest vote possible. But as importantly, the candidates agreed on a political track as well as that technical track. And that political track will be some power sharing arrangements, so there's an inclusive government in Afghanistan. And they believe that that is most suitable for Afghanistan at this particular time. So while the devil is in the details and much work remains to be done, particularly on the political framework, the discussion in Afghanistan now is not about civil war, it's not about insecurity, it's about a political deal in order to govern effectively in the future, and I think that's fairly significant.
I've always felt that God is in the details, but that's a different topic. Pakistan, you mentioned Pakistan, you've had to deal with Pakistan. Whose side is Pakistan on? And are they trying to suppress these terrorist organizations, or are they working with them? I find Pakistan a puzzling, I was about to say ally, but I don't know how to characterize them.
Senator, in my time in Afghanistan, I've met generally monthly with our Pakistan counterpart, and also he's now had the opportunity to travel to Afghanistan to meet with both me and our counterpart in the Afghan security forces. Numbers of hours of discussions. I'm convinced of a couple of things, both from the intelligence and from my engagements in Pakistan. First and foremost, I believe that the Pakistani Army recognizes that extremism is an existential threat to the state of Pakistan, and I think they are determined to do something about that threat. Less confident that they today have the capability to do all that needs to be done to deal with that threat inside of Afghanistan, which is why I think you see them focus narrowly on the most pressing threats to Pakistan, reflecting an inability to deal more broadly with extremism. This is one of the reasons I think it's so important for us to develop an effective relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I think the United States can play a unique role in facilitating that relationship, because the way we will get after this problem is by, one, having a common definition of extremism in the region, and number two, then having agreed upon framework within which both Afghanistan and Pakistan can deal with the threat of extremism, as well as the very real political and economic challenges that exist between the two states.
So as we draw down in Afghanistan, it's more important than ever to establish a good, strong working relationship with Pakistan.
Senator, an effective relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan is critical to our long-term success in the region.
Thank you, General, and thank you for your extraordinary service.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Chambliss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and General, thanks to you and your family for your continued commitment to America, and we're very thankful that you have been where you've been coming out of Afghanistan. You're the next in line of a number of great leaders to serve as Commandant, so we look forward to your continued service there. Taking up where Senator King left off on Pakistan, there is no long-term solution in Afghanistan without some sort of cooperation out of Pakistan. Is that a fair statement?
Senator, that's absolutely a fair statement, and one of the critical components of our military campaign is to begin to develop effective military-to-military relationships between the two countries. I couldn't agree more.
I want to ask you about the detainees that were released recently. I understand 12 non-Afghans were released from Par 1. 10 of those were Pakistanis, and they were all returned to their home country. I'm concerned because I know that the serious nature of the alleged incidents that these prisoners were accused of, and we've got 38 more non-Afghans, I understand. Can you address why these 12 were released, and what's our long-term policy with Afghanistan regarding non-Afghan prisoners at Par 1?
Thanks, Senator. I can. And first, with regard to the 10 that were sent to Pakistan, we didn't release those individuals. We turned them over to Pakistan after the U.S. State Department got assurances from Pakistan that they would be properly handled in accordance with the nature of the crimes that they committed. We have 38 third country nationals right now, and a similar process takes place where the State Department deals with the nation from which these individuals come, gains assurances, and then the Deputy Secretary of Defense will sign an authorization for them to be released and after notifying Congress. The challenge with this issue, Senator, is that our authority to hold these individuals will expire on the 31st of December of 2014. So we're working very hard now to ensure that we properly transition these individuals to a place where they can be held accountable for, again, the acts that they've committed.
And do you have confidence that the Afghans are going to treat them in the way that they should be treated because of the acts they've committed?
Senator, we're not planning at this time to turn them over to Afghanistan. We have a plan to turn them over to the countries from which they originated. My sense is that if we were to turn them over to Afghanistan today, I couldn't guarantee you that they would be properly handled.
I want to, again, take off on something Senator McCain asked you about. We had General Campbell in the other day to talk about continuing operations in Afghanistan. And with the drawdown to the 9,800 this year, drawing down again next year, give me your view as to the long-term situation as you understand it right now as we head into the end of 14 through 15 and more importantly into 16. What's your understanding of how this is going to work?
Yes, Senator, with regard to developing sustainable Afghan security forces, I think the pace of withdrawal right now could result in Afghan forces being sustainable. And I'm comfortable that a regional approach to train, advise, assist in 2015, where we help mature the institutions, the processes and systems that allow the ministerial level organization to support tactical level organizations, the work that needs to be done can be done in 2015. I'm also confident that there's some work that will require a longer period of time, but much of that work can be done in Kabul inside the ministries. The issue that I really can't talk to you about with any degree of confidence is what the threat to the homeland might be after 2016. That's certainly an area where I think the assumptions and the conditions that informed our current decision would have to be evaluated over time.
And in that respect, if you had to rate the possibility of either al-Qaeda or al-Qaeda affiliated operators inside of Afghanistan or migrating to Afghanistan as we draw down and resuming training operations much like we saw before 9/11, what degree would you rate the possibility of that taking place?
Senator, I can assure you from what we see on a day-to-day basis and from the intelligence that there are individuals in both Afghanistan and Pakistan who are determined to attack the homeland. They're determined to replicate acts like 9/11, and the pressure that we have placed on those networks over the past decade is the reason they haven't been able to execute a 9/11. So I would say that the risk, without continued pressure on those networks, of them regenerating and attacking the homeland would be significant.
Is the Haqqani network still enemy number one?
Well, Senator, I would view al-Qaeda as enemy number one. Haqqani is certainly the most virulent strain of the insurgency in Afghanistan and presents the greatest risk to the force because of their emphasis on high-profile attacks. The other thing that's significant about the Haqqani network is they actually provide the network that allows al-Qaeda in the region to have sanctuary and continue to resource itself. They're certainly, if not the most important group to the sustainability of al-Qaeda, they are certainly one of the most significant groups that allows al-Qaeda to sustain itself in the South Asia region.
Talk for a minute about the morale of American soldiers in Afghanistan now. What's your thought? Senator,
I am, and I mean this sincerely, extraordinarily honored to have the opportunity to lead the men and women that are in Afghanistan today. And their morale after 13 years of war has met or exceeded anybody's expectations over time. They're focused on what they're doing. They believe in what they're doing. They trust themselves. They know they're well-trained and they're well-equipped. And they trust their leadership. So I would assess the morale of the forces in Afghanistan today, and frankly in the force as a whole, is something we can all be very proud of.
48th Brigade of the Georgia National Guard is charged with basically tearing down Camp Phoenix. I visited them when they got there, and they were fired up about the job that you had given to them to do that, and I trust they're doing well.
Senator, they are, and as you know, the job we gave them to do is one of the more difficult jobs that needs to be done over this next year. It's a piece of infrastructure at Camp Phoenix that they're down at that we want to close. Closing a base is a challenging task, but they have taken that on with enthusiasm, and they're doing a superb job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your leadership, General.
Thank you, Senator Champ. Senator Hagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Dunford, welcome. I also know that your wife has played a very big role in your success, and so we welcome Ellen and your niece. I am the daughter-in-law of a former Major General in the Marine Corps Reserve, and just know that so many people hold the Marine Corps in the highest regard. So we thank you for doing that, and you've got some big shoes to fill from Commandant Amos, who has certainly led the Marine Corps, I think, in a very good leadership. I did want to talk a little bit more about the Afghan National Security Force. As we wind down, as you wind down your tenure as head of ISAF, and where you have seen the withdrawing of 20,000 troops in an environment with an unsigned bilateral security agreement and an election riddled by fraud that you've spoken about, tell me how prepared the Afghanistan National Security Force is to take over, especially in light of what we have seen, the incapability of what's taken place in Iraq.
Senator Wood, and thanks for that question. I think rather than just give you my personal assessment, maybe I'll just outline what the Afghan forces have done over the past few months, which in my mind is indicative of their current capability. First, we had over 300 campaign events involving thousands of people, some as large as 20,000. The Afghan forces secured all of those campaign events. There was a Nowruz, or Persian New Year festival in the northern part of the country back in March. 100,000 people came. They secured that event. There was another event in the country that involved people from all over the region to attend, a number of significant threat streams. Those threat streams were disrupted, and the Afghan forces were able to provide security. And probably most significantly, what took place on the 5th of April and the 14th of June is indicative of the capabilities of the Afghan security forces. On both of those occasions, millions of people, despite being threatened by the Taliban, had the courage to go out and vote. And that courage was drawn, in my assessment, from the confidence that the Afghan people, and the sense of ownership that the Afghan people have for the Afghan security forces. So while I'm very aware of the challenges that must be addressed to have sustainable Afghan forces and the capability gaps that continue to remain, I'm equally confident that the Afghan forces today are capable of providing security to the Afghan people. They have done that for the past year since they assumed lead responsibility. They're in a tough fight this summer. Our forces, when I arrived, we had over 100,000 forces on the ground. We have 40,000 right now. We're providing very little support on a day-to-day basis to the Afghan security forces, and they are yet still able to be successful against the enemy.
Can you talk about the participation of women in the Afghani forces?
I can, Senator, and it's not a particularly good news story. There's a goal in the Afghan Army and the police forces for 10% women. We have about 1% in both the Army and the police force right now. There are some bright spots. We have the first female police chief in Kabul. We've got a couple other senior level officers, and both the Minister of Defense and Minister of Interior have taken this on as an area of personal interest, and they have a very aggressive recruiting plan. Within ISAF, we recently received from Croatia a brigadier general whose singular responsibility will be to assist us with gender integration in the Afghan security forces. And so from a leadership perspective, I think there's an emphasis by the leadership in Afghanistan to make this better. But I wouldn't for a minute understate, Senator, the very real cultural challenges that are going to make the progress for women in Afghanistan very slow and very deliberate, and quite frankly, contingent upon our continued presence after 2014, as well as some of the support that we provide being conditional in order for them to make progress in this particular area.
How many women in the Marine Corps are serving in Afghanistan?
Senator, I don't know, and that may be something good that I don't know because we actually don't keep track of things like that.
Okay. I want to move to the Camp Lejeune water contamination issue. One of my top priorities since has been to get help and answers for those individuals in the Marines that have been affected by this water contamination at Camp Lejeune, and as many as 1 million Marines, family members, and civilians that were stationed at the base from 1950s until the 80s were exposed to some harmful chemicals that have certainly led to the development of cancer and other diseases. It's been a long quest to get answers, and we are finally beginning to get results of studies that have shed light on this tragedy. As someone, I know that you too have served at Camp Lejeune during this time. I hope you make this issue a personal priority, and when you are confirmed, will you work with Congress to overcome any of these bureaucratic hurdles that we've had in the past? I feel good from the Marine Corps' perspective. We're still working with ATSDR and some other areas that to overcome any of these hurdles that may halt or delay the pursuit of answers for the affected Marines and their families.
Absolutely, Senator, and we'll do all we can to be transparent with Marine families and, frankly, at the end of the day, to do the right thing.
Thank you. And then tuition assistance. I think that is a powerful program that allows our service members to pursue education in their off time. And I think it enhances the professionalism when serving and certainly helps to prepare them for the civilian workforce when they transition out. Congress has sent a very clear message about the importance of this benefit, and by restoring it in fiscal year 13 and then by restricting the reprogramming of that in fiscal year 14, and in the Marine Corps' 15 budget, the request originally included a proposal to cut this tuition assistance by close to 2/3, and also included a 25% cost share by the individual Marine. And it's a program that I support, and I've defended it. I was pleased to see that the Marine Corps quickly changed course and then fully funded this tuition assistance for fiscal year 15. If confirmed, will you continue to show strong support for the tuition assistance benefit?
Senator, I have taken a look at the guidance that General Amos provided for the tuition assistance program, and if confirmed, the guidance that I would provide would be consistent with what General Amos has provided.
Because this is a benefit that these men and women, I think, have really deserved, and it has certainly helped from an educational standpoint for those individuals and, as I said, when they transition out. So thank you. I'll look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you, Senator Hagan. Senator Wicker.
Thank you, General Dunford. Thank you for your testimony and for your service. Let me just try to follow up on a few things that have been mentioned. Senator Inhofe mentioned our amphibious fleet. It's clear that we're not anywhere near our requirements there. Let me ask specifically about the LPD 17 program. It was originally planned for 12 warships, was reduced to 11 vessels. This committee restored that 12th LPD. It's my understanding that the Senate Appropriations Committee has found the funds for that 12th LPD and that it's authorized in the House version of the National Defense Authorization Act. Do we need that 12th LPD?
We do, Senator.
And what's your risk, what's your assessment of the risk of the Marine Corps and our troops' ability to execute objectives around the world, particularly the Asia-Pacific, if we do not get that number right?
Yes, Senator, we're both short of the numbers of ships required to meet the combatant commander's day-to-day requirements, as well as to aggregate Marines to conduct an amphibious assault. So I believe that 12th LPD will help mitigate the risk, not completely close the gap, but it will help mitigate the risk that we have right now in both of those areas.
Would it help you as the next commandant if we would go ahead and get these bills on the president's desk for his signature before the end of the fiscal year? What problems does it cause when we let the fiscal year expire and we haven't given you a National Defense Authorization Act, and we don't have our Defense Department funded with an actual appropriation bill, but rather a continuing resolution?
No, thanks, Senator. And I know from my previous experience as the assistant commandant, what that frequently requires us to do is break programs. It's actually a very inefficient way to do business if you don't have a bill passed by the end of the fiscal year.
Well, you know, we have reported out of this committee the Carl Levin Defense Authorization Act, and I know that he would like nothing better than to get it on the floor this month, and I would join my colleagues in that. Now, let me also follow up then.
I can just correct that. I really wanted to get this on the floor last month.
But that was yesterday, and yesterday's gone. We need to get it done. I think you and the members of this committee are on the same page. I just implored the leadership of this Congress to do whatever's necessary to get these bills on the president's desk in a timely manner. Let me follow up then on the question of the pace of our drawdown. Right now, we have 30,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
And another 10,000 from various coalition allies for a total of 40,000.
That's correct,
Now,
Senator.
at what pace are we going to get to 9,800? What will it look like at the end of this calendar year?
It will be at 9,800 by the end of this calendar year, Senator.
So it's going to be a pretty rapid drawdown.
It is, and this is the way it was planned so that we could keep the maximum number of forces on the ground throughout the election period as well as through the fighting season in the summer. But as we discussed a while ago, the infrastructure piece is one of the key drivers, and we've been simultaneously working the infrastructure reduction and transition plan throughout the last year. So I'm not at all concerned about the pace of drawdown to get to 9,800. We have a good plan in place, and we'll get there.
Are we going to be at 9,800 through most of calendar year 2015?
That is the plan, Senator.
Okay, so like November, for example, of 2015.
We will have begun the drawdown by November of 2015.
And at that point, how many of our coalition allies will have troops? How many coalition allied troops will be with us there?
We'll have 4,000 plus or minus that'll be with us in 2015. As we collapse back to a Kabul-centric approach in 2016, I'd expect we'd have at least half of that number in 2016.
And so we'll have about 5,000 troops during 2016.
The guidance the President said was we would have about half in 2016, and the number 5,500 is out there, but the President's guidance has been about half.
And your testimony with the before the committee today, and your best judgment to the Congress is that the numbers that we project for 2015 will be adequate to provide security during that calendar year. Is that correct?
Senator, that is correct. The numbers in 2015 are consistent with the recommendation that I made to the President.
Okay, and you reserve the right, as I understand it, to look at conditions on the ground and change that recommendation as it goes forward beyond calendar year 2015. Is that what I understand you to have told me yesterday?
Senator, I think any commander, and I certainly believe I have this responsibility, any commander has the responsibility to provide the President with best military advice, which includes a continual reassessment of the assumptions and the conditions that were behind any recommendation that was made.
Well, I hope you will, and I'll tell you this, General. I think we're all impressed. We're impressed with your record. We're impressed with the answers that you've given us, and we think the President's got the right man here. I just have to say, I implore you, and I charge you with speaking truth to power. And if it looks like, as Senator Inhofe said, if it looks like we're not getting it right, as we didn't get it right in Iraq, I hope you will come back to us and tell us we're not getting it right and that something needs to be done. We need to know that. We didn't get the right advice, frankly. We got surprised in Iraq. And I have here a news item, which I think I'll ask to be inserted into the record, Mr. Chairman. It's a statement by General Amos, your predecessor. And I'm going to do you the favor of not asking you if you subscribe to his views, because I don't think that would get us anywhere. But basically, if I could just read a sentence or two. Stepping into an intensifying political debate, the head of the Marine Corps said the United States doesn't have the luxury of isolationism. Instead, Iraq's deterioration may have been prevented if Washington had maintained a larger U.S. presence there. General James Amos, who's scheduled to retire this fall, offered strong views on both debates. On Iraq, Amos said he believes that the ISIS takeover of central Iraq and the growing political fissures between Maliki and the country's embattled Sunni minority may have been avoided if the United States hadn't completely withdrawn from the country in 2011. I have a hard time believing that had we been there and worked with the government and worked with the parliament and worked with the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Interior, I don't think we'd be in the same shape today, Amos said during an event at the Brookings Institute. I agree with this distinguished military leader, and it breaks my heart as it breaks the heart of General Amos and other Marines and other troops to see what has happened after all of the blood and sacrifice and treasure the United States has spent. That if we had gotten the correct advice and we had been given a more realistic assessment, this disaster could have been avoided. It's up to people like you to help us understand the ways and means to prevent this type of disaster from happening in Afghanistan. I believe you're the man to do it, but we look to you to come back to us and tell us the truth and give us your best guidance as a military expert on what we need to do to make this situation work in Afghanistan. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Wicker, and I join you in feeling a very strong level of confidence that that's exactly what General Dunford would do, and as he has testified this morning, has the obligation to do if the assumptions which have been made don't turn out to be correct. So I join you in that feeling of necessity that we can count on our top military leaders to do just that. And I've talked to General Dunford about the same thing in my office, and I thank you for your commentary here today. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Dunford, congratulations on the appointment, and thank you for your service. You have a lot to be proud of in the work that you've done together with American military and our coalition partners to enhance the capacity of the ANSF. I had a hearing recently in the Foreign Relations Subcommittee that I chair about Afghan civil life post-2014, and your predecessor, General Allen, said something that kind of made us all sit back in our chairs. After talking about continuing security challenges, General Allen said, but corruption is a bigger threat, existential threat to Afghan society than security challenges are. And he wasn't minimizing security challenges, he was elevating corruption challenges. And we all were struck by that, but when I've watched the play out of the elections in Afghanistan, the Taliban threatened them from a security standpoint, but as you pointed out, the ANSF did a superb job in blocking the Taliban from being able to disrupt the elections. But the challenge with the elections were allegations of corruption. The corruption threat proved to be more real or to be more impactful on this election process than the security challenge. And I think that is proof of the adage that General Allen made, but it's also proof of the good work that you've done, and I applaud you for it. Questions about your role as Commandant, should you be confirmed, and I have confidence you will be. You have to balance a lot of tough priorities, security priorities, personnel priorities, budgetary priorities. The needs of today are usually kind of the readiness challenges, and the needs of tomorrow, modernization. Let me ask you about both of those. What are your greatest concerns regarding readiness today in the Corps.
Thanks, Senator. General Amos has ensured that all Marines who are deployed in harm's way in a forward deployed, forward engaged, deploy at the highest state of readiness. So those forces are absolutely well equipped and well trained. Having said that, we've paid the cost over years for making sure that those Marines that are forward deployed, forward engaged, have the wherewithal to accomplish the mission. And that cost has been borne at home station. And today, approximately 50% of our units at home station are in a degraded state of readiness. That's largely an equipment readiness issue today as a result of the years of war and wear and tear on our equipment. So certainly one of the key things would be to ensure that we had the resources necessary to reset that equipment that'll be coming out of Afghanistan. And as you may know, Senator, we've identified a minimum of 2 years as the window of time where we'd continue to need OCO funding for that very reason, to reset that force and to restore the Marine Corps to be the force that you expect it to be, which is not half ready, but completely ready to do whatever the nation asks it to do.
What are your top priorities on the other side of the ledger for force modernization as you come into the role of Commandant?
Senator, I think broadly speaking, the critical thing is that you expect us to be a naval expeditionary force in readiness. You expect us to be able to come from the sea in a wide range of conditions, again, in every climate and place. And I think today there's a number of areas where we're going to have to focus to ensure that we do have the amphibious and the expeditionary capabilities necessary to fight tomorrow's war as well as today. And I think balancing those requirements for modernization with today's readiness is going to be a significant challenge, and I know you'll help us with that, Senator.
Indeed, one of the challenges you have in the modernization side is acquisition programs. You inherit some acquisition programs, some that are working very successfully, some not as successful. What will be your philosophy as Commandant in the acquisition area to make sure that the investments in technology and equipment that we make are well spent?
Senator, where I have seen acquisition programs work is where leadership is personally and decisively engaged in the acquisition program. And if confirmed, I can assure you, particularly on the major defense acquisition programs, that the program manager, if not in fact, but certainly in practice, will be me.
Talk a little bit about the progress the Marine Corps has made in opening up combat-based MOSs to women since Secretary Panetta's announcement in early 2013.
It's clear to me that the Marine Corps understands the direction set by Secretary Panetta, and by January 2016, we'll be prepared to make recommendations as to exceptions to policy. I think the approach the Marine Corps has taken now, a deliberate, a measured, and a responsible approach, is exactly the one that I would take were I to continue to be confirmed. And certainly at the end of the day, you can be sure that the recommendations that I would make would be based on the impact to the combat effectiveness of the Marine Corps in order to meet the standards that you expect the Corps to meet.
And finally, General, just a compliment. Often as I travel, I'm traveling in a foreign relations capacity, not armed services capacity, and I interact with the Marine Security Guard at the various embassies we have around the world. That is a critical program that has been enhanced in the aftermath of the Accountability Review Board's recommendations following the tragedy in Benghazi. But I've just been enormously impressed with this program and with the Marines' ability to scale it up to meet the ARB recommendation. I don't know, it may be one of the few billets in the Marines where you get to serve without a commissioned officer telling you what to do. It's I think all NCOs and enlisted personnel, but they do a superb job, and we just need to make sure we continue to pay attention to that program, help the Marine Corps as it needs budgetary resources to staff it up. But I just want to tell you that the appreciation of the State Department for the great work the Marine Security Guard folks does is very, very high, and I share that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Ayotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you, General Dunford, for your incredible leadership in Afghanistan, and I can't think of a better man to serve as Commandant. And I also want to thank your wife, Ellen, for everything that she's done for our country and the Marine Corps. I wanted to ask you, General, if we follow the course of action that's been announced by the administration in Afghanistan, without any changes in the reduction of forces, in other words, 9,800 to half at the beginning of 16 to about 1,000 embassy presence in the beginning of January of 17. What's the best case scenario for what happens in Afghanistan? And then I would also like you to answer, with no changes to the pace of withdrawal, what's the worst case scenario? So we can understand what the two possibilities are.
Thanks, Senator. The best case scenario for the next couple of years would be that first, we have successful political transition this year. The Afghan forces continue to be successful coming out of the fighting season. They have increased confidence and capability in the fall of 2014. The international community meets their Tokyo and Chicago commitments, so we have the resources necessary to sustain the force and to continue the development efforts that are critical to Afghanistan's future. That the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan improves such that they have a cooperative relationship in dealing with extremism, and that we minimize the risk of malign actors being involved inside of Afghanistan as they grow and develop. The Afghan security forces, in the best case scenario, would be sustainable by 2017, such that a very small presence inside the U.S. Embassy in what we describe as a security cooperation office that would manage foreign military sales, engagements, and so forth, with some amount of ministerial capacity advising as well, would be there. But in effect, by 2017, we would have addressed those gaps that I've identified for the Afghan forces. They would be sustainable, and again, we would have stability as a result of political transition. The worst case scenario over the next 2 or 3 years would be first starts with the political transition, and we don't have successful political transition. And I think that's a foundational element to any success that we're going to have. We also begin to lose international community support over time. The AFPAC relationship doesn't go in a direction that we want it to, and both states fall short of where we would want them to be in terms of being effective counterterrorism partners, both from a capacity perspective and from a will perspective. And if we then found ourselves in 2017 without a decisive presence in the region and without effective CT partners in the form of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and those two nations cooperating with each other, I think what you would see in 2017 in a worst-case scenario would be the space that al-Qaeda would need to grow stronger and to plan and conduct operations against the West, something that they haven't been able to do over the last several years because of a combination of the pressure, largely the pressure that our U.S. government interagency partners in our special operations have placed, but also contributed to by the support that we've had from Pakistan and Afghanistan.